Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're talking to Mahlia, who is Mahlia Amatina. Have I said that right, Mahlia?
Yeah, yes.
Who is an artist whose exhibition we are hosting on the River House website. And it's an exhibition that looks into life on the spectrum, as Mahlia was diagnosed in 2015, I believe. With Asperger's. First of all, I'm just going to go to Mahlia and say welcome. Thank you for coming this morning. Thanks for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here.
Yes, and the work is absolutely stunning. I loved it. I love looking at your images. It's quite interesting actually, because it's hard to know. It's hard to see that those creations have come out of something that's perhaps negative, that it's come out of anxiety. How has it felt for you creating those pieces of work?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the art itself was tied in with when I was diagnosed. So as you rightly said, I was diagnosed 2015, 5.5 years ago now. And at the time, I didn't really know anything about autism beyond what I'd heard about in the media, so beyond what I'd seen like in a film or read in a book. So to then be told earlier in that year that I may have Asperger syndrome, and then to be later diagnosed with it was quite sort of overwhelming. It was quite big news, because I had never considered it. So my instant reaction at the time was to reach out to other people on the spectrum and find out how they experience their various autistic traits. So I suppose this exhibition, it kind of came from that initial urge, I suppose, to connect with others, find out how they are and how they experience day-to-day life. And I'll show you a questionnaire that I did actually. It was this one. So it was exploring Asperger syndrome, and I actually produced a questionnaire because I used to work in market research anyway, before I became an artist. Different world back then. But yeah, so I got people to pick traits that they experience on the autistic spectrum. So here's an example of like the questionnaire. So someone might pick the need for structure, and then I got them to describe what that kind of meant for them, and then the colours that they associated with it. And then I got them to do sort of mark making that sort of translated how it felt for them, the need to have structure in their lives. Because for me, art is very much a language. Like when I don't have words to describe exactly how I feel, like mark making and abstract art is what I have, and colour. So it was from this that I started exploring along with other people. That kind of led to this exhibition, the first one that I did around my diagnosis. And then all of that has been an accumulation really to life on a spectrum, which has then incorporated more of how I felt about diagnosis and the various traits, and also my understanding of autism, because as I said, like I didn't really know much about it at all. So as I've tried to educate myself over the years and speak with people, it's been like an artistic version of my findings and how I've experienced my diagnosis.
And what I find fascinating is presumably you were an adult when you were diagnosed. How old were you, Mahlia, when you were diagnosed?
Yeah, so I was 30, so quite a sort of life-changing point anyway, like changing careers at 30, being diagnosed at 30. It all felt very profound. It was a very big deal.
Why do you think you weren't diagnosed before that?
So one of the things that my research has taught me is that women and autism, so a lot of women are undiagnosed, because if you think about how autism diagnosis was put together, it's come from a very male place, like science, doctors, all of that. And it's only been sort of like the last 10 years or so that actually people realize that women present differently with autism. So they may not have traits which are associated stereotypically with autism, or they may show in different ways. So for example, masking is a big thing that women do, and mimicking. So a lot of women will have role models, like say their moms, who they would just kind of see as a way to learn to socialize. So I know I've learned that a lot from my mum. She's a very social person, so I've learned a lot of that from her, and also masking how I feel, so hiding a lot of what I feel through learned behaviors, and that's a lot more common in women. So it often you don't notice it as such, so women don't get diagnosed as much. So that's one of the issues around it. I mean, it is a lot more complex than that, and there are various other reasons too. So I feel like that's probably one of the profound reasons why I wasn't diagnosed before. And I think, yeah.
Did you feel like though that there was something different about you, even though you were playing this role, if you like, then mimicking?
Yeah.
Did you feel that? Did you know you were kind of mimicking? Did you know you were putting on this front?
No, I think for me it was just a way to be in the world. It was just survival. It was learning to get on, learning to fit in. I think as a kid, as a teenager, as a young adult, like you just want to be able to fit in with society and life. And so I didn't see it as mimicking or anything like that. Yeah, it was just me trying to get on.
Fair enough. Oh, Emily's got a question. Here we go. Okay, so Emily, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was just curious. I know you said that you had you changed careers at that point. Was art something that you always practiced, or at the point of diagnosis, if you did practice it before, did it change? Did it change your the way you expressed yourself through art, or was it a newfound means of communication, if you like?
So I've always been hugely creative throughout my life, like whether like it was arts, crafts, photography, making clothes, anything like that, ceramics as well, actually a lot of. But I'd never really done painting as such. So when a job that didn't work out came to an end, I thought I'd have some time off to do some activities that I like. I did a painting course for the weekend. Loved it, absolutely loved it. And it was like this new way of communicating, as you put it. And I just felt so alive by it. And at the time, I went back to Nepal, which is where I did some volunteer work. I came back from there and they had these horrendous earthquakes. And so actually my very first exhibition was Kathmandu Calling, which was a fundraiser for Nepal. I just kind of threw myself into it because I wanted to do something to help. So here are some of the paintings from that exhibition, a lot of which were drawn upon from photographs. So I took thousands and thousands of photos. So it's a very different process I used to create these paintings and to do landscapes as well.
They're beautiful, absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
And I think what's really interesting, I mean, I kind of touched on it before, is the color, you know, the amount of color that you use. For me, I suppose, looking outside, I would have thought that sort of anxiety and those things that you face day to day, for some reason, have a kind of a black and white feel to them. But obviously, you know, and like you were saying when you were asking for feedback and you were talking about what colors people represented with those thoughts, so that's really interesting to understand where those colors come from, which are fantastic.
Yeah.
And it makes it so much more three-dimensional. You can almost feel it, you know, you can almost touch it. I wanted to ask you about your experience in New York,
Okay.
because to me New York is such a kind of a crazy, busy, loud, dirty sort of a place. How did you cope, you know, in the streets of New York and with that kind of environment?
Yeah, it was really, really hugely challenging. I think I completely overestimated what it would be like. I think I just saw it as I thought it would be a bit crazier than London, but actually London's quite tame in comparison.
Yeah.
And I think the only time I'd been to London, to New York once before, but it was a holiday, so it was you know, just staying in Manhattan and just being very comfortable, not really using the subway or anything. So actually being out there for 3 months and having to get on the subway and travel to visit all these different neurodiverse spaces and interview people, meet with mentors and all the rest of it, and go to the art studio as well that I had there. Yeah, it was really challenging. yeah, it took me a long time to recover from that as well. I think because it's 24/7 there. It just doesn't stop. You've got sirens going off, and they would just alarm me. Like my whole body would just like shake. Just it was like I find it shocking that people can live there. And also the scale of everything as well. Like it's just never ending. Like you can't see the end of like buildings or because you see the end of a building, then you see another building behind it. And then just the smells. The subway was probably the worst experience, I'd say. Like just the intense smells, like the vomit. It was just so gross.
Do you have some slides of some images that you created while you were in New York? So we can kind of.
I think so. It came after Easy Washing Lines.
I love the Washing Lines project, by the way. It's brilliant.
Thank you. Oh, I don't actually. Probably because I was just again like trying to get through it. I've got an image of when I was in Spain at an artist residency. So the images that you see at the top, like that's pretty much what I have from New York. I think that says a lot. That speaks volumes.
Yeah. So I mean, did you? So you spent 3 months there, but was it really hard? Were there moments, were you able to balance the kind of the joy of the newness and creating with that kind of really challenging aspect as well? Or were you like just desperate to get home?
I mean, so I had a project laid out of what I wanted to do there. So it was the Develop Your Creative Practice Fund through the Arts Council. So I had a project proposal for what I wanted to get done. So I knew that I had had these various spaces to go and visit, and they were brilliant. Actually, the people that were running the spaces were amazing. I think it was interesting to see what support artists with disabilities have out there, but also it's very different in that theirs is linked to their healthcare system, and obviously theirs is very different out there because they pay for their healthcare. So it wasn't comparative to the UK in that respect, but it was still very interesting to see their sort of links with like industry and design, and the people that I got to meet, and also the shared studio space. That was really cool because it was open 24/7, and it had people from all around the world. And as someone who normally paints sort of alone, I use like a converted garage that I've like got downstairs in my parents' place. Like it was just so different to actually being around people and having those conversations and seeing other people's work. That was really enlightening, and that was a great experience, definitely. So there were moments of greatness. So I'm glad I did it though, definitely.
It was a challenge. Emily's wondering, has your work, has your art sort of changed since you were diagnosed? And actually, did you practice before your diagnosis? Was there a moment where you started working because of the diagnosis? Well, how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, it all kind of, I didn't practice before I became an artist in 2015. So I kind of became an artist. It was probably exactly the same time as it was suggested that I may be autistic. So it was that whole, it's interesting that it both diagnosis and my new career ran in parallel. So it all kind of happened at the same time. But in terms of my practice over the years, I would say it's 100% changed from like the landscapes of Nepal to begin with, using photographs as a process to paint, to like what you see here, and also what I've shown at the online exhibition. So it's, I mean, a lot of these were influenced by my time spent in Barcelona, where I was doing an artist residency. There were a lot of Spanish artists that I've forgotten the name of the language that they speak there in Barcelona.
Is it Catalan?
Catalan. Yeah, Catalan. So Catalonian artists. So kind of quite unheard of, like artists outside of the region, I suppose. But I just had all these books. It was in the countryside, and I was just like looking at them. So I was quite influenced by them. And I think, again, spending time by myself and being able to reflect on the various traits and having that deeper understanding as well of what it is, like that insight into what it is that I'm experiencing, like the mirroring, the mimicking, like I didn't have like an understanding of what that was or like a word for it. So I suppose with that newfound information and different artists and surroundings, there was much more sort of, I feel like these are a lot more sort of raw. Like I was producing them quite quickly, but then going back and adding collage. And again, collage was something new that I was using. I was working on paper. I think also where I've traveled and been abroad, I've had to think about what I'm using material-wise from a practical perspective. So when I went to New York, I created these paintings, the Transition series that formed the online exhibition. And they're a really strange shape because they were what fit in my suitcase when I traveled to New York. So yeah, various elements really, but it's definitely changed it. And my work's also become a lot more interactive as well, as I wanted to engage with neurodiverse audiences, but also young and old people, different types of audiences in general.
Well, in that vein, actually, the feedback that you from your questionnaires that you did, what sort of feedback did you get?
Yeah, so those questionnaires, they went out to fellow adults on the spectrum who had been diagnosed as an adult. So they were my sort of target group. They're amazing, actually. So one of the interesting things was, I think, what we spoke about earlier, like about colour and how people chose specific colours that they associated with traits. So sensory overload. There are a few people that actually said lime green, which I find like really quite specific.
Wow.
So again, you were expecting kind of like quite sort of contrasting, sort of black and white, quite dramatic, a monochrome, but actually lime green, it's
God, that's
it's quite shouty, loud colour. Yeah, it was really interesting because there was a lot more colour that people spoke about than I anticipated. So that was great. And it was just amazing. And also, I think it really taught me that it is a spectrum. Everyone experiences their various traits in completely different ways. So, you know, you meet two autistic people that they're not going to be the same in any way. And also those traits change over time as well. So sensory overload, they change for someone depending on what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, what they're going through, and at different points in their life as well. So it is quite a fluid thing. And I think that was something that really came about through the questionnaire and also through those that I got to meet over the years too.
I mean, it's only just hit me really that the word spectrum to me represents colour, and I've never actually thought about that you know, we talk about people on the spectrum, and actually the spectrum to me is about a colour spectrum. So that's really interesting. How have you fared during lockdown in terms of anxiety? Because presumably, actually, it's more comfortable for you to be, you know, in your own space and not having to deal with the outside world. But I'm sure there are unknown anxieties that we wouldn't think about for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still a social person. I still enjoy time with friends and family. So being apart from them has been really difficult. And I think we were saying at the start of the call, like, you know, people feeling quite zoomed out. I'm not feeling too inclined to have too many calls with people. I just want to see people now. But it's changed really how I felt. I think the change element has been probably the most cumbersome and difficult. When, especially at the start, when we just didn't know what was happening and rules kept changing, and often the rules didn't make any sense, and I'm very sort of logic orientated, so when they didn't translate into what I saw as my personal risk factors, I didn't understand the rules. Like I couldn't make any sense of them, and I found that really hard. But at the start it was really difficult. I remember just being in fits of tears and just like not wanting to like sort of like live my life sort of day to day, like not being able to, because I didn't feel like I had any control over what was happening, and I didn't understand what was happening. It was a really distressing time. Like I didn't sleep. All of a sudden I had to, because I have employed work as well, and then just having to work from home but with no preparation, and just and then just that whole year of like just different tiers and different, just everything changing all the time. But again, like it not having any specific relevance to me as such. So yeah, really hard.
Have you been producing work, Mahlia, during this time?
I did at the start a lot. I kind of just thought, okay, this is so, I just felt so out of control, so distressed, so there was so much energy that I just wanted to be able to apply it somewhere. So I did actually end up doing a memory series of paintings. I think there were around 14 in total. So I just really went for it and just was working on it all the time. So yeah, I did do a lot of painting at the start, and then I think after that I was just, then there was that sort of, it's almost like that anxiety kind of went away, and I was just left with a lot of lowness, where I just didn't have that energy. And then also started to focus more on what I could do online, because I think I realized that I'd have to find a solution to like my career and how I could keep going with it, because like, you know, this exhibition was supposed to be in the physical world, I think a year ago now exactly. So yeah, it was then about finding solutions and realizing that we're going to be living in a different world, so I'd better do something about it.
Yeah, so with that in mind, when you realized that this whole exhibition, you were going to have to completely rethink that, what was that journey like?
Yeah, again, quite hard, because my work is particularly this exhibition is, as you can see on the slide, it's interactive. Like there's a magnetic board there, and there were lots of pre-cut shapes where people could move them around and create composition in reflection of how they're feeling. And again, like when you're in a space away from home, you could kind of think, okay, well, how do I feel? You have that detachment, whereas when you're at home, thinking about how you feel, I don't know, it's very different for a start. So I feel like the activity doesn't work in the same way, or certainly not as I intended it to. I did try to put this online at another in another space, but it was too complicated for the digital designer to do. I think it takes skill and money, time. So it's something I'd have to think about. And you also want to be able to do it quite well. So I'm still working out how that can be translated online. So yeah, to be able to put it on like web pages is just not the same, really. And again, like this is another example. So this exhibition was one of three, and the first one was in the physical world, just about. But again, like you could answer questions on a particular autistic traits that anyone can relate to. So for example, anxiety that we've talked about. And then these responses would go up in the exhibition space, as there was like a narrative created around this, around mental health. So, and again, like you get to walk around the space, you get to see all these little bits of writing, you get to watch videos. So this was what I intended to create. But then translating that online, I mean, you could watch a video, you could take part in an activity, but you're having to go onto different pages. There's not this seamlessness that you'd have in an exhibition space. So I find that really hard, and it's almost like I shouldn't be trying to translate what I did in the physical world to the online world. I should probably be looking to do, like, to design something for the online world specifically. So I don't think it would look like this, but I think it could still be interactive, collaborative, and educational.
Was there a point at which you just thought, I can't do this? You know, that step from what you wanted and what you hoped to achieve had just gone, you know, the wall had gone down? Or were you able to kind of think quite positively about, right, no, let's solve the problem?
I think it's been a mix of the two, really. At times I've just been like, well, how can anyone be an artist in this online world? Like, how is it possible if you can't speak to people face to face and whatnot? But other times when I have had the opportunity to do talks like this, it's been quite nice actually, because you do get to speak and you do get to engage. So you can still have that connection with people online. It's just different, and I suppose it's about not comparing the two. I had a commission that I won through the Free Space Project. They have a a healthcare centre in North London, and they had a team of like online sort of designers where I was able to translate the space into like an immersive kind of space where you walk around. I think that was really encouraging, and I think I needed that just to get my brain thinking a bit about, you know, the possibility of the online world, because I hadn't really thought about it before. But it's been a real mix, really. It's just been really positive, but then really like low about it. I still really look forward to being able to exhibit in the physical world again. I think that's how art should be, really. But then there's also opportunities. People who may not be able to visit a public space and have particular anxieties about doing that. I think, yeah, there's opportunity there to be able to connect with those people, which I'd like to be able to make the most of.
And what are your plans for the future? What's next? What's the next project?
I think it's going to be about designing work for the online world. So just starting from scratch, thinking, what can I do with the online world, which is just for the online world, and still conveys my messaging in terms of what I want to like educate people about neurodiversity and the autistic spectrum, and how can I do that well. So really learning about that, which is something I never thought I'd do. So carrying on with that and carrying on with the advocacy work, and I'd also like to get back to painting a bit more as well. So yeah, those digital online work and painting, I think, are the goals for the year.
And Emily's asking, the immersive exhibition that you mentioned, is that still available for people to see?
It's not available to see, but I think there was a video, like a sort of walkthrough video, and that was quite cool, actually. Even the video, you could see like the different rooms that you could kind of go into, and videos that are played there. Yeah, so there's a video that's available.
Great. It'd be nice to see that. I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
So the exhibition you showed us, where people were putting sort of cards down a slot, and you came up with what were the questions you were asking? What were they writing on those pieces of paper?
So I was giving examples of how I experience particular traits, like I feel very anxious when I use public transport. So I gave an example of my survival kit. So I have like this big Eskimo hood that I wear, and particular textures. I have rocks in my pockets to help kind of give me a sense of grounding. I have like my playlist. So all these kind of coping mechanisms that I use. And then I'd ask people like, what makes you anxious and how do you cope? So I use that with anxiety, depression, I think sensory overload, the need for structure, and also having a unique perspective and seeing things slightly differently. So a slightly more positive one. And it was about getting people to really think of the different sort of places or ways in which they may feel in these particular ways, and then writing their responses on this piece of paper, this card, and then posting it into a letterbox. So there was a sense of you're sharing, but it's kind of private at the same time, anonymous, and it's just for me. So I would go into the exhibition space and check those responses, and then I'd pick words or phrases, and then I'd write them out my label maker and stick them on this masking mirror, as I called it, and then people go in and have a read of how other people feel, I guess. And it's about sharing anonymously, but in a way that you want other people to kind of see. It was really lovely. I found it was the way in which people were very honest, and also it was quite sad as well, because people really struggle, and that was really hard to read, actually.
What kinds of things that were there that really kind of touched you, or
I think you realize how profound mental health is and how it affects so many people in so many different areas of their life. The exhibition that I did get to do this at, it was run over pantomime season, so there were a lot of children there, and I was amazed at how many children, I don't know why, but children always put like their age, like they'd put like age 7, age 10, which is really sweet. But so these are really young people, You know, they'll be talking about bullying or how they wouldn't sleep, how they were, how they'd hear things, or just all these different ways in which they would struggle. And I was kind of holding their stories, like their experiences, and you just realize how hard and challenging life is. And you know, it'll be like this one thing that someone's written, and that's their whole life, isn't it? That's like, it's not their whole life, but it's a big part of their life. And it's just it was amazing. So I felt this great kind of weight when I'd read people's responses. But it was quite powerful stuff, like especially when it comes from very young children. But there were a lot of positive things as well, like people wrote, I think there's greater awareness of autism, so there's more diagnosis with people younger than perhaps, like, you know, when I would have been at school. I don't really remember knowing any autistic people when I was at school. So I think there was greater awareness, and there were people, even when I was setting up the exhibition, I'd had like a really long day from like 8 a.m. I think it was after 6 p.m. And I was exhausted, and I was going up to reception to ask a question or asking for someone. This little boy appeared, and he just said, "Oh, you're the artist, like I recognize you from the video." And he just said, oh, he'd been diagnosed with Asperger syndrome as well, and that this was the first time that he'd seen anything that reflected how he feels. Like, it was the first time he'd seen that. And he put it a lot more eloquently than I just said it, but it just literally melted my heart. Like, it was just so amazing, because I was like, well, this is why I do this. And like, for him to see something that he could recognize in terms of how he feels inside, like, that was just amazing. So there was some just outstanding feedback like that, which which was incredible. And the fact that people could share how they feel in terms of the mental health and difficulties, again, I think that speaks a lot about art, really, and how it reaches people in a way that other mediums don't, I guess.
Absolutely. Gosh, that must have been, I'm just hearing you talk about those, you know, those children, and as you say, it's almost like they're sharing it with you, just you know, so you must have felt a little bit of a weight of that. But also they're releasing it, aren't they? It's a way for them to kind of get rid of it, in a sense, you know, it's going into a little hole. And so those responses then that you chose to put up on your boards, is there anything that's going to happen to them now, or was that was the end of the process, if you like?
So I suppose, so that was one of 3 exhibitions, and I was hoping with this exhibition and the one that will follow, I'd be able to again replicate that experience. But again, I think that activity was very much made for the physical world. Like, it worked very well then, but I think I need to find a way in which it translates better online, because I know we've tried to do it, and there haven't been any responses. But I understand that. Like, I think it's just, I think I need to think beyond just using the same questions and putting, I need to find another way in which people can share, because I think putting questions online, it just doesn't work. So
and I think when you're in an exhibition, and you're in it, and you're feeling it, and you're part of it, you're much more inclined to want to share or be part of it and see yourself in that sense. Whereas, very difficult to get people to engage in that way when they're sitting in their own homes, you know.
And typing, again, I think it's very different when you've got pen and paper. It's a different process. It's quite novel, having like a box, like, it's all of those things, really, isn't it, in the physical space. So it's not as simple as just putting it on a screen and expecting people to type. I think I need to think about how I could do that in a way that will work online. So I'd like to be able to think about that. Also, I think after that first exhibition, there was this kind of, I'm always tired after an exhibition anyway, but it was almost about putting those responses, because there were hundreds of responses, again, which I didn't expect, because again, when you're coming up with ideas, you don't really know if people will engage. They're just ideas, aren't they, that you have. So I think there was a sense of, okay, I just want to park all of these responses, so I have them all. So I will look back at them at some point. I think I'd like to see if I could do something online which garners more responses,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe something. I mean, I've got enough. So I don't know. I'd have to feel quite strong in myself, I feel, to tackle that as well. I think that's, from an emotional level, it would take a lot.
Do you think your work, because obviously a lot of your work has been about other people's experiences and drawing on that and creating work from their experiences, but a lot of artists, it's much more about themselves and their journey. What's that balance for you with your work? Do you feel like you enjoy much more kind of using other people's experiences or experimenting with your own feelings to create?
Yeah, really good question. It is something I think about, actually. I think it's been a bit of both. Like, I've used my own experiences, but I think at the start, where I just wanted to reach out to others, there was that. Then I kind of went away and did my own work for a bit. And then later I felt like I was talking about autism, but actually it is a spectrum. And I felt like I'm not an expert in this. I'm an expert in terms of my experiences. So actually, I need to include others, because then it gives a better representation of what the spectrum is about. So, and it's about having a narrative as well. I quite enjoy being able to have other people contribute to that. I feel like it makes it richer, and in terms of the fact that I'd like to have a lot more interaction and collaboration with people. So yeah, it's a bit of both. At the moment, I feel like the digital work, that will be quite sort of collaborative, but then I feel like getting back painting, that's going to be very much just me. And I think I'm slightly more looking forward to the painting, just because it's been a while now since I've done that, and I feel like I've got a lot of ideas and things that I'd like to try out.
Yeah, great. And I was going to ask you about going back sort of to the beginning, really. And Emily said, you said that you were quite artistic, you did a lot of creative stuff when you were younger, but that you then were in a very kind of normal job, I suppose. So and you've spoken about the fact that you also do another job. So what is that job that you do, and how have you managed to kind of like, incorporate both those worlds?
Yeah, I mean, I guess growing up, I've always been very creative, but also quite very academic as well. So I've always been a bit of an all-rounder. So I think with that and being at school, you're always kind of pushed down the more traditional routes of, I guess, more typical work. So my degree was in psychology and business. I picked it because I really enjoyed all the different various elements of it. And yeah, it's been interesting kind of having had that background of doing sort of 9 to 5 work, realizing it wasn't really for me. I now have employed work. So I work in a careers department at university. I also work in a communications role as well. Sorry, you can hear my dog in the background. I think we had some post. But yeah, so for me, I quite like having, I guess it's the self-employed versus employed aspect. So the employed part gives me that regular income every month. I get to do something different, which takes me away from my art for a part of the week, which I think I see the value in. And then when I do get back to my art, it's like, I don't know, it just feels that bit more special. And I always come back a bit more energized. And I quite like the balance of the two and what each of them give me. I find it works quite well.
And also, the employed role that you do sounds like that's quite collaborative. You're mentoring people, presumably you're working with people, so you've actually got a lovely balance there then of being able to then come back to do your art, which is quite solitary.
Yeah, definitely, because art being self-employed and the type of work that I do is very solitary. I've been working with all of you lovely people, and I've had meetings with you guys, but otherwise the rest of the time it's just me in my world. So it is quite nice to be drawn out of that sometimes, and then to actually work alongside people. And I really enjoy it. Like, I really like all the people that I work with, and going out to a different space. Not obviously not at the moment. I'm just at home, but it's yeah, it's a really beautiful space. Like being on campus, like all greenery, and yeah, wonderful. It's kind of yeah, it's just the best of both worlds for me. I think that balance really works.
Yeah, sounds perfect. I think I'd like that. Mahlia, I'm very aware that you've got this wonderful presentation that we're looking at bits of. Were there parts of it that you wanted to show us? Do you want to go through it? Do you want to it would be nice to have a look, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we can start. I think some bits we've been through. We haven't touched on 80 washing lines, actually, so that's
oh yes, I'd love to talk about that. Yes, let's talk about
I think that. Yeah, I feel like this we've been through. Yeah, so that was that first exhibition on yeah, so again, this was when I realized at the exhibition that using writing, using videos alongside visual art, I felt like that had a broader appeal to people. Like, people don't always resonate with visual art, so some people, video is much more effective. So that was when I really started thinking, oh, using different mediums is quite effective. But yeah, so after the Kathmandu Calling exhibition, so one of the paintings there was called Look, They Also Dry Their Clothes. So this was the photo. I don't know why I'm pointing at it, because you can't actually see me pointing at it. But yeah, so I did a painting that was yeah, encapsulated that, and people loved it. Everyone was like, oh yeah, like they've had these earthquakes, it's like terrible, but look at the way they wash and dry their clothes. And people just started talking about how they wash and dry their clothes. And it was the most popular painting. And again, with art, like, I never know how people are going to respond, and that really surprised me. I didn't realize that that would be the most popular and most talked about painting. And then I think through various conversations, I came to the concept of around the world in 80 washing lines, and just like people's laundry, and getting people to, so I thought I could get people to send in photos of their laundry from different countries. And at the beginning I was just like, well, you know, they're going to be boring because everyone's just going to send like similar kind of pictures. But as you can see from this slide, like they're all completely different photos. And I think the very first photo I received was from Thailand. It was a girl I knew, and she sent it was just an orange, it was just a monk's robes. They were bright orange, and it was just stunning. It was just this really vivid, like bright orange against this like very luscious, beautiful greenery of Thailand. And then also Australia, where you can see bottom right, second one up, at the mountains, and this guy who's just like hung his clothes on the balcony. Another really stunning picture. So I just started collecting washing line images. It took around 2 years, actually. And then I interviewed each person as well to find out a bit more about them, their life. And the premise of the exhibition was around the fact that it doesn't matter who you are, what you do, where you are in the world, everyone's got laundry to do. It was all about commonality amongst us, like human beings. We often focus on the disparities between us, but actually there's so many similarities. And it was amazing, because there'd be like an interview with someone in Malawi, and they'd be, you know, worried about like their family, and it's like, well, I'm sure any of us can resonate with that. Or like I think someone in Denmark was like a woman in her 20s. She was like thinking, oh, am I doing the right thing with my career? I don't really know what I'm doing. And I'm like, I'm sure we've all felt a bit like that at some point. So that was yeah, a project that kind of grew over time. So I did workshops with different community groups. So I'm based in Reading, so I did local groups in the Reading area. And that was cool because different community groups, everyone, so I think I did the Pakistani community group, Barbados, there there were another couple as well, but everyone just had so many stories about laundry. You just can't get people to stop talking about, like even at my exhibitions, like people would come and tell me about their first washing machine, or how like their godmother would do their laundry in a particular way, the smells. Like everybody had a story, and they were all completely different, and they were all really beautiful, lovely stories as well. So it really is something that affects all of us, that basic need to have clean clothes to wear. And then again, like so it started off really small. I started like printing out the images onto clothes and hanging them up in laundrettes, like community spaces around Reading, also London, a few of them. And then the BBC actually picked up on, there was a story in the news about the decline in laundrettes and what laundrettes are doing to entice people. So that press release of the decline in laundrettes, like it worked really well in my favour, because I had artwork in a laundrette. So that was the basis of this BBC report that they did. So that was nice to be on the BBC, my first time on TV. Fantastic. Very exciting.
So can we see some of the artwork that kind of you produced because of these wonderful images?
So it was more about the stories, I guess. I did do some paintings, but I didn't really show many of them. They were more kind of just what I did based on the images that I received. I think this was more about the workshops that I did, the stories that I was collecting, the interviewing that I was doing, also about like it was an autism friendly exhibition. So so you can see in this image, the clothes were, so the images were printed out onto different types of clothes. They all had different textures. So you could touch everything in the exhibition. You can really experience what different textures are like. There were sounds, there were different smells as well. So you can actually smell the clothes. Some were really strong, some weren't. There was sounds of washing machines in the background. It was a very full-on installation. So that's what it was kind of focused around. And I'm tempted to redo the exhibition, but like interview these people like 5 years later, it would have been. But let's see.
I love it. I think it's brilliant. And I'm absolutely with you on this idea of, you know, helping people to recognize that we're all the same, you know, and we all have these absolutely mundane similarities, you know, in part of our lives, which is really important. I love it. I think it's such a great idea. Have you got any other crazy ideas coming up? Have you had any strange and wonderful thoughts during lockdown that
I mean, mindfulness was something that really has helped me a lot over the years. So I remember at the start of lockdown, I used to spend 19 minutes every single day just doing line drawings, meditative drawings. That really helped me, and they became my sort of diaries, I suppose, like COVID-19 diaries. So I did that for a while, but then again, it was really unclear whether we were in lockdown, whether we weren't. So the practice didn't continue, but it was a really good practice for at the start when I think I really needed it. But no, it's just been such a strange time, hasn't it? It's just been about survival and then regrouping. I'll see what comes out sort of going forwards, but I'm sure this whole experience of COVID has, you know, it's affected every single one of us. So it'll be interesting to see how that does translate into what each of us do for work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's going to have a lasting effect in so many ways as well. You know, I think a lot of people have talked about kind of getting over the trauma. You know, we have been through a trauma, really, and we will have.
Definitely.
And we are going to have to think about how we come out of that and how we deal with that. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of creativity. It's actually been very hard over the last year, because there's this impression that we've got all, you know, it's great, we've got all this time to create and to do things, have thoughts and have projects, but actually exactly what you were saying, the kind of the inconsistency and the misunderstandings and the not being able to really focus because suddenly it stopped and then it started again, has actually been so destructive in terms of artistic kind of ability, because there's never been a very clear delineation of how long, what, why, so that we know we can create in this space now for a bit,
Yeah.
or we can't. Or so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's been the worst possible kind of scenario in terms of being able to have that clarity in one's own inspiration and time to explore in a way. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I think you explained that so well. It hasn't been this kind of amazing extra time where it's just been luxury, and it hasn't been like that at all. It's none of it's been planned, none of it's been anticipated. I haven't felt like I could do anything useful really. It's because I've had no control of knowing how long it will be for, which isn't very conducive to the thought process and creativity, and also just going for those, being in the same place as well. Like I feel like it's kind of blunted an element of myself. It's normally going to different environments can really be helpful, but not being able to do that. I don't know, I feel like my brain has altered. I don't quite have words for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you find that being on the spectrum, that it's really important to be kind to yourself? Do you think that's kind of an aspect that you've had to learn? Because presumably it's quite easy to beat up on yourself, you know, when you have these episodes, or when you're feeling down, or when you're feeling anxious. So is that something you kind of taught yourself? Have you had help with that?
Yeah, I think for me, mindfulness has been a really important educator in that, because I've been doing mindfulness for a number of years, just like sort of 10-15 minutes a day, and I try to be mindful in how I live my life and what I'm doing, which is something I'll probably be practicing for the rest of my life. But I think from that comes compassion and sort of being really kind to yourself. And I think understanding about autism and really understanding why I am affected the way I am, that's given me understanding, but then also compassion, because I'm like, okay, well, it takes me 2 days to recover from a social event with lots of people, but actually I know that, and I know why it does, and so I can understand it better, and just be kinder to myself for it. I'm not always the kindest. Like I think, you know, you always try to like push yourself, and I think we're all a bit guilty of that. We're always kindest to others, aren't we, than ourselves? But yeah, I think I've just, because of how we're living and not being able to make any plans and having to be ever present, it's been easier to be compassionate, I suppose, in a way. So that's something, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And do you think that that mindfulness that you've been practicing has helped your work, has helped your creativity in that sense?
I think it has, because you reach a state which, a sense of, I guess, awareness. Calmness doesn't always come, but it's a sense of awareness, at least, of your thoughts and your body and how you're feeling, even if you're just feeling very tense and you're not able to do that much about it. And I think when I'm painting, when I'm creating, again, it's a different sort of flow state that you kind of go into. It's that awareness. It's, I don't know, they're very similar but very different. You're very focused and in the flow. But again, it's that, I suppose it's stepping out from the everyday. That's what both activities give me, I suppose. You're not in the sort of day-to-day getting things done mindset.
And I do think it's interesting that your work definitely has a sort of an outward looking sense to it. You know, it doesn't feel like it's very kind of self-indulgent or navel gazing, you know, which, you know, is, I think it has, I don't know, would you agree, Emily, Nigel, it has this lovely sort of sense of what you're seeing rather than, you know, and how you're dealing with that, but also with other people's influences. And I think that's why it's very easy to relate to and very nice to look at, because you feel a part of it as the person who's seeing it, rather than sort of it being something that we have to try and understand. It's interesting. Even though we may not be on the spectrum, everybody can understand anxiety. There's nothing, you know, there's not one person in the world who's never experienced anxiety. So it's very relatable. And I just think it's fantastic work, Mahlia. I think, you know, please carry on. carry on doing as much as you can. And I just, yeah, I hope that, you know, at some point we can get back to being in a gallery and actually interact and feel and smell and all of those lovely things you were talking about. So thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating. Really enjoyed talking to you and looking at your beautiful work. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Gemma. Likewise, I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and all your very insightful questions as well.
Thank you. Well, it's you've inspired them. Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for joining us, everyone. And looking forward to seeing what happens next.